The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, and welcome our interviewee, the Honorable Steve Negron. Steve, how are you today?
Hey. Good, Carl. How are you, sir?
Okay. You must be a little bit anxious with this stay-at-home type of thing and running for the U.S. Congress.
It is. We've had to adjust considerably. Certainly by now we would have been out door knocking already and putting our game plan into place. So I think what we have to do is we've had to adapt. And as we go through the day, you'll find that there's some amazing things that we're doing. We just launched yesterday. There was a article by John DeStaso. We have now hooked up with a company called Buzz 360. And Buzz 360 gives us an application called Swipe Red. And Swipe Red is going to allow us to still reach constituents in this area and time of the social distancing and the physical distance. And I think it's going to be exciting. We're on the phone every day, Carl. That's something that has to happen. And so it's been a little bit different, but our strategy has changed a little bit, but the message is the same. So even though we've got this COVID-19 situation in front of us, everybody's have to adapt just like our campaign has, but we still feel very strong about it and looking forward for the rest of the summer.
No, that's good. When do you think that we'll have a little bit more freedom to get out and talk with people?
Sure. Well, I'm hoping sooner than later, clearly. I believe that we have to take our own personal responsibility. We have a great understanding that there are those individuals that are at higher risk. And I think those individuals need to take that personal responsibility upon themselves and make sure that they don't put themselves in a situation where they are potentially going to be in a situation where they might be able to contract COVID-19. But for the rest of us that are young and healthy, I think we need to go out and if there are precautions that need to be taken, like, I want to go back to my church. I miss going to Immaculate Conception, but I know that we have a significant amount of our parish that's elderly, and I would go with the mask only because I know that that's my choice to be able to protect my fellow parishioners, but not that it's a mandate from the government. I think the government needs to allow its citizens to be responsible for their own actions and go forward. But I think the governor is doing as best a job as he possibly can. This is a situation that no other governor has faced, not just in our state, but across the country and even at the national level with the president. So I think that we're going to be opening up soon. I think that we're going to surprise people, Carl, that we're going to take to heart some of these measures. But let us take those measures as individuals, individual constituents within the state, and not really infringe on our personal freedoms.
Well, since you bring the question up of age, and I'm one of the ones that have to watch out, what do you think about the way it's being handled as far as the overall area, federal, not just the state?
Sure.
Because we've seen that, at least I think that they're handling it differently in different places.
Well, I think a lot of times, Carl, is that you have to look at the situation that's within your confine, if you will. And I think how we responded in New Hampshire is clearly going to be different how they had to respond in New York City. So, I think that we have to take a calculated approach to what it is once we identify with empirical data and information that is useful. Information for information's sake, as we used to say in the business, is useless. It's actionable information. It's clear, concise. It's timely information that we have to have. We can't broad brush sometimes. I think what we did is we did a broad brush approach to this in the beginning and just swept everybody up. And now I think you have to look at, where are those areas that require more attention? The case we've seen that most of the COVID-19 deaths in the state of New Hampshire have been in elderly care facilities, assisted living facilities. And we now know that senior citizens are more prone to the effects of COVID-19. And so therefore, maybe we should apply some different rigors and approaches to those areas where some of the other ones of a 20 and 30-year-old, if those 20 and 30-year-olds are going to come in contact with those senior citizens, then apply some mechanism there to protect the senior citizens. But at the other case, if you're not part of that high risk pool, then I think that there's some things that used to be lessened and then go forward. Look, we're going to all Monday morning quarterback this thing. We're going to look back and say, were there things we could have done differently? Absolutely. There's always better ways to do something. I think what's important now is that as we go forward, this has now have been a defining time frame for not only for our state, but for our country. And we're compelled to apply the lessons learned out of this event going forward. And, COVID-19 is a situation that kind of gave us a gut punch, but there might be other things out there that might be able to be as harmful to our nation. And so we need to make sure that we're as prepared as we possibly can. You try to be as smart and as prepared as possible. You can't always plan for everything, but if you have a good framework going forward, and I think this is going to show us some things we can do differently. And I think that's the thing that we need to come out of this and as we learn, as we move forward.
Okay. And you think that we should be getting back to the normal type of operation, but have a higher sensitivity to people who are more susceptible to this disease?
Right. You just used the word there, normal. I guess that's the one word that scares me, Carl, is that I don't know what normal is going to be moving forward. We can't surrender to fear. And I think that's a lot of things that my opponent has been doing, and certainly her party is peddling fear. I'd like to think of it that I would like to peddle optimism and peddle hope, and building our future. Let's take the lessons learned from this and apply them going forward. She came out, Congresswoman Custer came out with a plan, and all she talks about is keeping us with the government and the thumb on us, right? So stay home, don't venture out, social distancing. And not that those things aren't important, but that's not how we should be viewing this. We should be looking at, okay, how is it that we can then open up the aperture and actually allow our communities to start growing? Look, we are gregarious people by nature. And I think that by us not being able to do those social things, those things are important. I think there are some byproducts that are happening out of this lockdown that we have yet to realize. I just was made aware of an individual who was a veteran who was doing some outreach, and his ability to do outreach was helping him cope with his situation. When he was no longer to do that, those demons crept back in, and unfortunately, he took his life. So I think that there are some things out there that are unintended consequences that we're seeing with us being in a situation where we can't leave our homes for the most part. So I think you got to do some smart things out there, Carl. And I think we're going to look at, let's get out there, let's start doing some things smartly, but let's start walking out there in the fresh air and start realizing that, we had a pandemic, we have a pandemic, it's not over. We know how to deal with it, and we're dealing with it smartly as we move forward.
Well, I think you're right, and I think that's what what we're seeing the president is trying to do. However, they, as you said, they turn everything around and point out, oh, this is going to be dangerous. You're just not being sensitive to the danger out there. And
right, and I think that's and it's a traditional game plan for them. Scare you, herd you, keep you in one place, and make you become dependent. Right, make you dependent upon government helping you. I mean, it's a page out of Saul Alinsky's book. Once you fix one problem, create another one, and then create another one. And I think what we're seeing right here is that they're afraid, given where we're going to come out of this, and we will. We're a resilient people in a great country, an even greater state. And what they're afraid of is that we're going to realize that all of this stuff that was happening, all of the information that was being pushed out to us may not have, in fact, been as accurate as it should have been. And because of the inaccuracies, we have now become to feel fearful of some of those things that may or may not have even come to fruition. So, they're peddling this fear because they understand that that's a way to control us. Have you ever wondered how one sheepdog can control a herd of sheep? It's fear. And that's what I think that's what they're doing. And And they're going to realize that, and a lot of these things they're trying to do with the stimulus package, the first one that came out, the stuff that they try to stuff inside of it, these are things that they couldn't get in through the normal course of doing business within Congress or even within our local state house here. So they took this as a second opportunity, another bite at the apple, Carl. And so they're trying to stuff some things in there. Look, we have people right now, frontline defenders in COVID hospitals, that their hours are being reduced or they're being let go. That's not right. But yet there's money in there for other social activities and social issues that the Democrats wanted. Look, I'm not a guy about big spending. You know that. We served in the House together. If there's an opportunity to put some money out there to help those, absolutely, right? But I'm a small business owner myself, and I had to lay off 5 people, and I've been waiting a month now to be able to have access to some of that PPP capital because it all went away in the flash of an instance. And you look at some businesses like the LA Lakers, they got money. They sent it back, but they got money. For the life of me, I don't understand how that happened. Or the big steak franchise, Ruth Chris's, right? They got money. I think, just because the money was there, there should have been better controls and give it to the states. Let the states decide what's the best use of that money, right? You can't run this country and you can't run the states from Washington. You have to have a relationship. And quite frankly, our congressional delegation doesn't have that relationship with our governor that I think is important. And I think if I was in Congress, I know if I was in Congress, I'd be on the phone every day with my governor, with Governor Sununu, saying, what is it that you need? Let me go fight the fight for you. Instead of what we currently have is being part of this Custer's cronies, as I call them, and cozying up to Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi, to do some of their agenda. So I think that there was an opportunity here to do some great things. We did some good things. It could have been done a lot better, but you got a Congress right now that's trying to, and a state legislature here in our great state of New Hampshire that's trying to put roadblocks in front of those people that are trying to make the best decisions possible in the case of the president for the United States and in the case of Governor Sununu for New Hampshire. So look, we're going to look back and say there were some things that we could have done better. Quite frankly, get these obstructionist Democrats out of the way and let us get back to be able to doing the things that we do rightly in our state.
Do you see if your audience, your constituents see the same thing, the fact that they're very negative, that they don't agree with anything, they're trying to interfere, they want to hold up the distribution of some of these federal funds that's coming out directly to the governor and not through the bureaucratic legislation here in New Hampshire? I mean, we see that just the way it's been running. It's like you have two clans that are fighting one another.
They are, and I'm on the phones every day, Carl, right? So we make literally hundreds of calls a day, and it's the rarity that somebody says, we need to stay in the area that we're in. There are people that are chomping at the bit to get out. Now, there are some people that say, release everybody and let everybody go. And there are those that are saying, let's take this measured approach, as I alluded to earlier. Let's take a measured approach to being able to open up the state and open up the country. And I think that's where the majority of the people I've been talking to, Carl, that's where they're at. That's where their head's at. They clearly are disillusioned with the way Washington, specifically Congress, has obstructed the president and trying to do some things, and at every turn trying to belittle him and knock out his legs out from underneath him. Instead of us finding that we've got a collective enemy here, and the collective enemy is this invisible enemy known as COVID-19, let us rally around together. Let us put partisan politics aside and let us realize what's best for the nation. I think that they see this as an opportunity. Now, I'm not one of these conspiracy theorists that this was developed by the Democrats, but I do believe they saw this as an opportunity to look at how is there a way to affect the 2020 election. And so they're doing everything they can to politicize this, to make sure that they want to make our president look weaker. Look, we had an economy that was humming prior to COVID-19 hitting. Unemployment rate was the lowest they'd seen in 50 years for the Hispanics, and for African Americans, it was the lowest ever. I mean, we were doing some great things. And the one Achilles heel everybody talked about, if you remember, going back, is the one way to unseat this president is that if the economy failed. And this just so happened to be there. But I think the president is doing some great things out there to stabilize where we're at. And we're going to come out of it. And we're going to come out of it based on the things that small businesses are going to be doing. Look, I'm a small business owner, and we're being innovative. We've actually termed this phrase COVID innovation. And companies in our state and across the country are changing course and doing some things to help their fellow citizens. I'm here in a building in Nashville where one of the young companies that's here, Charged Concepts, does design engineering for prosthetics for veterans in the VA. And they have retooled, and they're now done making masks and face shields. And we're helping them to get the word out. So that's what's going to help us. We're going to get out of this, Carl, and it's going to be the small businesses of the great state of New Hampshire and the rest of the country that's going to lead the charge. You got to get the government out of the way. You have to unencumber the small businesses. You got to give them access to capital so they can start. Look, there are going to be some casualties from this. We know of some that are ready that are not going to open again, restaurants and small businesses, but there are some that are hanging on. And I think when we get on the backside of this, all of us together need to go out there and go to these places. You know, big box stores aren't hurting. Nothing against them, but, you know, they're able to withstand this onslaught. Little businesses are struggling, and we need to go back out and help them. And when we be able to go to a restaurant and have 6 feet distance or whatever the rules will be, when your wait staff comes over, you need to make sure you take care of them because, you know, they've been struggling for the last 2.5 months. So we believe that we're going to get out of this, and there's a lot of people out there that are waiting and chomping at the bit to get back on track.
I think what you're saying about building the economy back is right on, because how else are we going to pay for all this money that we've been spending? And right. The Democrats want to spend more, and they even want to raise the business tax on the businesses that are hurting right now.
I know, right? It's crazy. And as a small business owner, you had these automatic triggers, you know, and the governor seeing, you know, that it wasn't by fault of bad fiscal policy, but it was because of the situation that happened. And I know that he's trying to talk to the legislature to try and put a moratorium on his automatic triggers. But, you know, there isn't a bill that the Democrats don't want to fund. And they're going to spend us into oblivion. And so what we're going to show in our campaign is that though COVID-19 hurt us, they have given you a sneak peek as to how much spending the Democrats want to do. You know, there was a $5 trillion bill that Speaker Pelosi wanted to put on the president's desk. You know, right. There's no way this country can absorb the amount of spending that the Democrats, both here within the state and across this country, want to impose on this country, on us. And so we've had to go to the bank. We've taken out some money, but now we have to be judicious and to pay it back. And this is on top of the $23 trillion debt that we had going in. If you remember, Carl, in my last campaign, I talked about the national debt as one of the biggest things that was as a national security risk to us. What we have been shown is that, you know what, we need to shore up some things. We need to have an America economy first. We have to have a 21st century economy. We need to look at some things, learn from the lessons that are going to come out of COVID-19 and apply them as we go forward.
Well, would you say this is the biggest difference between your campaign and your opponents? Is the economy?
It is. You know, it's an economy, and we were also talking about healthcare, right? This whole Medicare for all that Congresswoman Custer is for, and I've got a video that goes out that we'll be launching here in the next couple of weeks that talks about the House of Cards, which is Medicare for all. What we need to do in that case of reducing healthcare costs is you need to have transparency. You know, for those of us as a consumer, we need to understand what the costs are and let us do comparison shopping, just like we do for everything else, whether it's auto insurance or home insurance, car insurance, whatever those case may be. We have to be able to do that. You know, we have to be able to have innovation, right? And innovation in healthcare is going to drive down cost. And we have to bring those things back. And I believe that, you know, we have to bring down the cost of medicines to do those kind of things. And so the difference between myself and Congresswoman Custer is that she believes that a Medicare for all, which I believe is just unsustainable. There's a lot of darkness in healthcare costs right now. you put Medicare for All out there. Now I'm dependent as a parent, as a father, as a small business owner, on some faceless bureaucrat that's going to tell me who I can go see, when I can go see, and when they say that it's free, it's not free. Somebody's going to pay for it, Carl. These guys are these doctors, there are going to be some people that may not want to participate.
Right.
Those are the kind of things that people need to ask those kind of questions. And in the economy, look, if you just look at what she wanted to put in some of these spending bills, which was craziness. There was no purpose and no reason. It was just an opportunity to promote some of their social programs that are out there. We should have looked at this as bare bone necessity to keep the country going. We knew we were going to take a step back. Our RPMs were going to be lowered, but they shouldn't have come to a complete stop. And all these kind of things that they wanted to add in, and they got some in. They got some things in there. I think were ill-advised. I think it wasn't in the best interest of the folks of New Hampshire. I think it was in the best interest of a former Democratic party, which I think is more socialist than Democratic. And I think that Ann Custer was in lockstep with them. So we're going to talk about those things that are the main differences between myself and my opponent. And you know what? I think Ann Custer is hoping, Carl, that the things that she was doing prior to the COVID-19 situation, that we're going to forget about it. I promise you that we're going to bring to the forefront and remind people that this was the person that voted to impeach our president and voted for those 2 articles. We're going to remind people that, I was the one who actually read the treaty between the United States and the Ukraine to see what, in fact, was this charge of abuse of power, which was the first article of impeachment. And I will walk you through step by step that what our president did was exactly what this treaty required him to do. And also that this treaty was actually signed by Al Gore during the Clinton administration. And I would ask Congresswoman Custer, why did the previous administration for 8 years, knowing that this corruption was happening in the Ukraine, why didn't they exercise their responsibility underneath the treaty between the United States and the Ukraine? And the other thing too, Carl, is that she was going to back Pete Buttigieg, and Pete Buttigieg unfortunately dropped out. But if you listen to Pete Buttigieg's platform and looked at his website, he was one of the presidential candidates that wanted to dissolve the Electoral College. And so us as a small state, in our first in the nation primary, if I have a congresswoman that is supporting an individual running for president that wants to dissolve the Electoral College, therefore rendering our state meaningless in a presidential year, I don't understand how somebody can put their head on their pillow at night saying that they're a congressional representative from the great state of New Hampshire and that they would rather sell us up the river, that we would have no say in a presidential year and no standing. I just don't know how anybody who can be a congressperson from the great state saying that, we don't need the Electoral College. Let the large 12 states decide on who our president is, and we'll never get anybody into our state again. So our job too, Carl, is to show our differences and remind all the great folks of the 2nd Congressional District the things that our current Congresswoman was supporting and backing prior to COVID-19.
Well, I think you're right there. You ought to go back and what she really was before she ran down the stretch for the seat in Congress again.
Right.
But having a Medicare for everybody means it's one thing fits all, and that's monopoly. There's no real desire and no real drive to be more efficient, to be better at what you're doing. You just everybody. This is what we have. This is all you can get. And they don't even let sign interest from companies that are out of the state. I think that's another thing we got to look at.
Absolutely.
But the question is not. It's a law that they don't allow any businesses to do it. Why should the government be able to do it?
Exactly. And, and I think what you'll look at, Carl, with this Medicare for All is that, where does the incentive come for those bright individuals that want to look at doing something new and innovative within the world of medicine? Those are going to go away, because it's now going to be this government-run bureaucracy, and that's going to be the largest bureaucracy probably that we have in the federal government. And who's going to be those people that's going to run that? Look, our government's too big as it is to be able to put an institution in that's going to manage our healthcare. It's not really going to happen. You know, you look at how the government is trying to manage the VA medical system. We know historically that the VA's had its own problems. So you want to just take that on a bigger scale and ask yourself the very basic question, can our federal government actually run a medical care program? And I would respectfully suggest to you that that's not something that they should be in. Let the private industry do that. It's been working. And, you know, and go around to all these other countries that have socialist medicine. I have a very dear friend who lives down south in Australia. And, you know, he's been diagnosed with a gallbladder issue a year ago, April, and still to this date has not been able to get it fixed. So, you know what? It's not what they are trying to sell us. It's not the greatest thing since sliced bread. And people are going to have to realize, and we're going to make them aware, is that this Medicare for All is just another dark cloak of secrecy that the government wants to hide behind.
Well, Steve, there's not much time left on our interview, but we're going to have you back again to
Absolutely.
go talk about some of the other things, like why does the Democrat hold up a lot of those approvals for some people that the president wants to put in place where he can make a more efficient operation? I mean, there's some people that have been waiting 3 years to get their candidacy approved by the Senate. It's a Senate question, but I mean, it's the same thing that they block making an operation of the government more effective.
It is true. And I think, you know, Carl, and to wrap up, I think it's just, you know, they're at every way, you know, I used to talk about ROI, which normally we talk about return on investment, but for them, it really is about resisting. It was about impeaching. It was about obstructing. And I think that's what they do. And that's their game plan. And they're going to try and do that at every turn and every opportunity they get.
Let's hope you can turn it around, Steve. We'll see what we can do to support you.
Well, thank you very much, Carl. And thank you for having me on.
Okay. Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.